My sister invaded the house I bought alone while my mother stole my key. But when I found her, moved in with her 3 kids, I called the police and exposed them all in front of the officers. I'm 32 years old. I work in tech and have been for almost a decade. And I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago basically destroyed whatever relationship I had left with my family. And honestly, I don't regret it one bit. The thing is, my whole life I've been the invisible daughter. You know, the one who doesn't matter as much, the one who was always second choice. And there came a point where I just said enough. But let's start from the beginning, because to understand why I ended up calling the police to remove my own sister from my house, you need to know what it was like growing up as me. I grew up in Texas, in a medium-sized town where everyone knows everyone, and for as long as I can remember, my sister Melissa was the star of the family. Melissa is 3 years older than me, so she's 35 now. And I don't know at what exact moment my parents decided that she was the daughter who deserved everything, and I was, let's say, the backup daughter. But that's how things always were. When Melissa turned 15, my parents threw her this huge party. Like with a DJ, professional decorations, super expensive dress, they invited like 100 people. When I turned 15, they took me to dinner at a mediocre Italian restaurant and bought me a cake from the supermarket. I'm not exaggerating, that's literally what happened. And I thought at the time, well, maybe there's no money. Maybe things are tight. But no, turns out there was money. It's just that money was for Melissa, not for me. Things continued like that throughout my adolescence. Melissa wanted a car when she turned 16. And boom. My parents bought her a brand new Honda Civic. Like new. That year's model. When I turned 16, they didn't even ask if I wanted one. They just assumed I would share my mom's old car when she wasn't using it. Melissa wanted to take dance classes, piano classes, whatever else. And my parents paid for everything without hesitation. I wanted to take programming classes at the community college during the summer, and my mom told me that if I was so interested, I should get a job and pay for them myself. And you know what I did? Exactly that. I got a job at a clothing store in the mall and paid for my own classes, because it turns out when nobody gives you anything, you learn to get it yourself. When it came time to go to college, things got even worse. Melissa went to a state university, nothing special, studied, I don't remember what. Something related to communications, I think. And my parents paid for everything. Absolutely everything. Tuition, books, apartment, food. They even gave her extra money so she could go out with her friends on weekends. I also went to a state university, studied computer science, which is a much harder major, and my parents told me they would help, but that I had to pay rent if I was going to live at home during my studies. Can you believe it? Melissa lived rent-free in her apartment with everything paid for, and I had to pay rent to live in my own family home. So I worked full-time while studying full-time, slept like 4 hours a night, and somehow managed to graduate with a 3.9 gigapascals, which is almost perfect. When I graduated, I thought that maybe, just maybe, my parents would feel proud, that they would recognize all the effort I had made, everything I had achieved without their help. They organized a dinner, just the 4 of us, at the same mediocre Italian restaurant as always, gave me a watch that clearly cost like $50. And my dad said something like, "Very good, Mija. We knew you could do it." That was it. When Melissa graduated 2 years before me with a 3.2 gigapascals, my parents threw her a huge party in the backyard, hired a catering service, invited all the extended family, bought her a trip to Cancun as a graduation gift. I graduated with honors in a super difficult major and got a cheap watch and a boring dinner. In that moment, something broke in me. You know? Like, I finally accepted that I was never going to be enough for them, that it didn't matter what I did or achieved, I was always going to be the second-class daughter. After graduating, I got an amazing job at a tech company in Austin, moved into my own apartment that I paid for myself, obviously, and tried to keep some distance from my family. I went to Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners because I felt I should. But other than that, I saw them as little as possible. Melissa married a guy named Brandon, who basically has never had a stable job for more than 6 months in a row. And together they had 3 kids in 5 years. Grace, who's 5, Noah, who's 4, and Aiden, who's 2. And guess who pays for everything, or at least helps them with everything? Yeah, my parents. Because according to them, Melissa needs support now that she's a mother, and Brandon is looking for opportunities, or however, they justify that he's a freeloader. Things got really unbearable like a year ago. I had been saving for several years, living in a modest apartment, driving an old but reliable car, putting away every extra cent I could because I had a goal. I wanted to buy my own house. Not a mansion or anything crazy, just a small house that was mine, where I could do what I wanted without having to ask anyone's permission. The apartment where I lived was fine, but it was noisy. The neighbors upstairs were always fighting, and the ones next door had like 7 dogs that barked all the time, and I just wanted a quiet place that was mine. So I started looking seriously. Hired a real estate agent, started viewing properties on weekends. But I didn't tell my family anything, because honestly, I didn't want to hear their opinions or their unsolicited advice. The problem was that a coworker, Amanda, who's always been super nosy and doesn't know how to keep her mouth shut, found out I was looking for a house because she saw me talking to my agent during lunch break. And it turns out Amanda lives in the same neighborhood as Melissa. What a horrible coincidence. And one afternoon she ran into Melissa at the supermarket and casually mentioned that her coworker Lauren, meaning me, was looking to buy a house. Melissa obviously ran to tell my mom, and my mom lost her mind. Messages started coming in like crazy. My mom sent me like 20 links a day to houses for sale, but all of them, absolutely all of them, were huge 4 or 5 bedroom houses located no more than 10 minutes from where Melissa lives. And the messages came with comments like, "Look, Mija, this house is perfect. It has space for everyone. It's close to your sister and the kids. It would be so nice if you lived nearby." I would respond with things like, "Thanks, Mom, but I'm looking for something smaller, something more within my budget." And she would insist with, "Don't be silly. An investment is an investment. Plus, think about all the space you'll need in the future." The future for what? I don't even have a boyfriend, and I definitely don't plan on having kids soon or maybe ever. Why would I need a giant house? Melissa also started getting involved. She would call me and say things like, "Lauren, it would be so amazing if you lived close by. The kids miss you so much. And Grace always asks about you. We could see each other all the time." Which was a huge lie because Melissa's kids don't even know me well. I see them like twice a year at family parties and they don't even remember me. But anyway, I would play along and tell them, "Oh yeah, that sounds nice. I'll think about it." While I kept looking for exactly what I wanted in places that had nothing to do with where Melissa lives. And then, like 8 months ago, I found the perfect house. It was a little cottage-style house with 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom in a quiet neighborhood about 40 minutes from where Melissa lives, which was perfect. It had a small front yard, a remodeled kitchen, original hardwood floors, and best of all, it was exactly within my budget. I saw it on a Saturday morning, made an offer that same day, and after some negotiations, the seller accepted it. The whole process took like 6 weeks between the inspection, the paperwork, the mortgage loan, and during all that time, I didn't tell my family absolutely anything. My agent thought it was weird that I kept everything so secret, but I explained that my family was complicated, and she understood. We finally closed the deal on a Friday. I signed all the papers, they gave me the keys, and I officially became a homeowner. The feeling was incredible, like better than I had imagined. For the first time in my life, I had something that was completely mine, that I had achieved without anyone's help, and that nobody could take away from me. I spent that weekend cleaning, measuring for furniture, planning how I was going to decorate, and on Monday I went to work feeling like I was walking on clouds. The problem came when my mom called me that Tuesday and told me she had organized a family dinner for Friday because, according to her, it had been a long time since we all got together. I knew there would probably be some drama, but I thought it would also be a good opportunity to tell them about the house in a relatively controlled environment. How naive I was. I arrived at my parents' house on Friday at 6 in the evening. Melissa and Brandon were already there with the kids who were running around everywhere screaming and throwing things as usual. We sat down to dinner. My mom had made lasagna, which is the only thing she knows how to cook. Well, honestly. And during the first half hour, everything was normal. Conversation, work, weather, stuff like that. Then my mom, with that voice she puts on when she's trying to sound casual but clearly has an agenda, asked me, "So Mija, how's the house hunting going? Have you seen anything you like?" And I, like the idiot I am sometimes, decided to be honest. I said, "Well, actually, I'm not looking anymore. I already found a house and bought it. I closed the deal last Friday." The silence that followed was so awkward you could cut it with a knife. My mom was frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth. My dad stopped chewing. Melissa was staring at me with eyes like saucers. Then my mom said, very slowly. You bought a house? Without telling us anything? I explained that yes, I had found a perfect house I could afford on my own, that I had already signed all the papers and had the keys. Melissa was the first to react and asked, almost screaming, "Where is it? Is it the one Mom and I sent you like a month ago? The 5-bedroom one near my house?" And I said no. It's a 2-bedroom house in another neighborhood. 2 bedrooms? My mom asked, like I had told her I bought a cardboard box under a bridge. Why do you want such a small house? And where is it? When I told them the location, Melissa practically exploded. She started telling me she couldn't believe I was so selfish, that the whole family had been looking at houses near her so we could be together, that the kids needed their aunt nearby, that how dare I buy a house without consulting them. And I sat there thinking, consulting them? Why would I need to consult them about a house I'm buying with my own money? My mom joined the attack and started saying I had been very inconsiderate, that family stays together, that Melissa needed support, that a 2-bedroom house was a waste, because when I had kids or when they needed to stay with me, there wouldn't be space. My dad, who almost never says anything, decided to put in his 2 cents and said it had been a very selfish decision on my part, that I clearly didn't care about family, that I had always been the rebel who did what she wanted, without thinking about others. That made me laugh. Literally, I laughed in his face. Because rebel? Really? I had worked since I was 16, paid for my own education, never asked them for anything, and somehow that made me the selfish rebel of the family. Melissa went on, saying she had AT&T planned for me to live nearby, so I could help her with the kids when she needed a babysitter. That Brandon and she were thinking about having another baby and would need more help. That a 2-bedroom house was ridiculous for a woman my age who should be thinking about settling down and starting a family. I finally got tired. I put my napkin on the table, stood up, and told them, "Look, I bought a house with my money, the house I wanted, in the place I chose. And I don't owe any of you explanations. I'm not moving near Melissa to be her free babysitter. I'm not buying a huge house I don't need and can't afford, and I'm definitely not apologizing for making decisions about my own life." Then Melissa started crying. My mom yelled at me that I was being horrible. My dad told me to leave if I was going to have that attitude. So I left. I walked out of that house, got in my car, and drove to my apartment with my hands shaking from anger. I thought that would be it, that they would be angry for a few days and then get over it. But oh, surprise, I was completely wrong. What followed was literally weeks of harassment. My mom called me 5 times a day, sent me text messages saying I was destroying the family, that Melissa was devastated, that the kids were crying because Aunt Lauren didn't love them. My dad sent me long messages about family responsibility and values, and I don't know what else. Melissa was the worst. She sent me pictures of the kids with sad faces and messages saying, "Look what you've done. Your nephews and niece need you, and you abandoned them." She also started posting super passive-aggressive things on Facebook like, "It's sad when your family turns their back on you," or "Blood is more important than anything, but some people don't understand that." Obviously. So all our relatives and friends would see it and think I was a horrible person. I didn't respond. Blocked the numbers I could, ignored the messages, but they kept coming. Brandon, Melissa's useless husband, also got involved and sent me a message saying they really needed me to reconsider because they really needed someone to live nearby, to help them with the kids, and that they were also thinking about the possibility of moving to a bigger house and would need financial help that I could now provide, since I clearly had money to buy houses. I mean, are you kidding me? They thought I was going to buy them a house too? The audacity of these people had no limits. Then, like 3 weeks after the disastrous dinner, Melissa showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning. She knocked on my door at like 8 in the morning. I was in my pajamas with my freshly made coffee. I opened the door thinking it would be the Amazon delivery guy. And there she was with all 3 kids. The kids were in pajamas too, Grace carrying a backpack, Noah crying, and Aiden half asleep in Melissa's arms. She told me, with tears in her eyes that I'm sure were fake, "Lauren, please, I need your help. Brandon and I had a horrible fight last night. I need to stay with you for a few days while things calm down." I told her no, that my apartment was 1 bedroom and there was no space. That besides, I was going to start moving to my new house in a few days and everything was upside down. She insisted, said they could sleep on the couch, that it would only be a few days, that I was her sister and sisters help each other. I was trying to stay calm, but I was furious. And I told her, Melissa, you're not staying in my apartment. You're not going to manipulate me with the kids. You need to resolve your problems with your husband, yourself, or stay with mom and dad. She started crying harder. The kids started crying too, and the neighbors started peeking out their doors to see what was happening. I finally told her to leave, or I would call the police, closed the door in her face, and stood there shaking with rage and adrenaline. I heard her leave, the kids crying all the way down the stairs, and I felt terrible for a second. Like, am I really that horrible? But then I remembered all the times Melissa had gotten what she wanted by manipulating everyone, all the times my parents had prioritized her needs over mine, all the years I spent being the invisible daughter, and the feeling of guilt disappeared pretty quickly. And that same afternoon, I changed my phone number. I sent one last message to my mom and Melissa from the old number saying, "This is my new number, only for real emergencies, not family drama," and blocked it. I also blocked them all on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, everything. I needed peace, and I needed to be able to move into my new house without all this constant drama. For a few days, things were quiet, and I thought they had finally gotten the message. I moved into my new house on a Thursday, hired a small moving company for the big stuff, moved the rest myself over the weekend, and by Monday, I was practically settled in. The house was perfect, exactly what I had wanted, and every night I sat in my new living room with a glass of wine thinking about how proud I was of myself. For the first time in years, I felt happy, really happy, without all the pressure and drama from my family. And then, like 2 weeks after moving in, my mom showed up at my door on a Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home that day, had a Zoom meeting in like half an hour, and there she was with a super fake, repentant face and an apple pie in her hands. She told me, "Mija, I'm here to apologize. I've been a terrible mother. You have to understand, I only want the best for you and your sister. Can we talk?" I knew it was a trap, literally could feel it in my bones, but I also thought that maybe, just maybe, she was really realizing how she had treated me my whole life. I let her in, which was my first mistake. My mom came in, made comments about the house, said it was nice, though small, sat on my couch, ate pie with me while asking me about my work, my life, normal things. After like an hour she left, gave me a hug, told me she loved me, and I thought, well, maybe things can get better. I didn't realize at that moment that while I was in the kitchen making coffee, she had been observing everything. The layout of the house, where the spare bedroom was, and most importantly, she had seen my keychain on the coffee table where I left my keys. And this woman, my own mother, took my spare key without me noticing. I realized like 3 days later when I looked for the spare key to give to a friend who was going to water my plants while I was out of town for work, and it wasn't on the keychain where I always kept it. On Friday of that week, I had to leave town for work, a 2-day conference in Houston. I left early Friday. The conference was Saturday and Sunday, and I planned to return Sunday night. Everything normal. The conference went well. I gave my presentation, did networking, all the things you're supposed to do. I drove back home on Sunday at like 7 at night, tired, but happy to return to my little house. And when I arrived, there was a car parked in my driveway. A car I immediately recognized. Melissa's van. My heart started beating super fast, and I parked on the street. I could see lights on inside my house. I could hear voices, and when I approached the living room window, I saw the most surreal scene of my life. Melissa was on my couch watching TV. Brandon was in my kitchen making something to eat, and all 3 kids were running around my house like it was theirs. There were suitcases in my hallway, toys scattered all over the living room, and a box of cereal spilled on my dining room floor. I opened the door with my key, went in, and everyone turned to look at me. Melissa had the audacity to smile and say, "Oh, Lauren, you're here. We thought you weren't coming until tomorrow." And I, trying to stay calm even though I was about to explode, asked, "What the hell are you doing in my house?" Brandon, with that I didn't do anything wrong, face he always puts on, said, "Your mom gave us the key. She said it would be okay for us to stay here a few days because our landlord needed to do repairs in our apartment," which was obviously a lie because if it were true, they would have stayed with my parents. I told them to leave. To leave immediately, that this was my house and they had no right to be there. Melissa started with the drama, saying we were family, that I had plenty of space with 2 bedrooms, that they only needed to stay a couple of weeks maximum. A couple of weeks? Can you believe it? I kept saying they needed to leave, my voice getting louder and louder. And then Grace, the oldest, started crying and saying she didn't want to leave, that the house was pretty, that she wanted to sleep in the kids' room. The kids' room? What kids' room? My spare bedroom that I was going to use as an office. That was my office. Not a room for my sister's kids. Brandon tried to calm me down, put on that condescending voice that men use when they think women are being hysterical, and told me, "Lauren, be reasonable. Just a few days, think about the kids." And that's when I completely lost my patience. I took out my phone and called the police. Melissa and Brandon froze, like they couldn't believe I was actually doing it. I told the operator that there were people in my house without my permission, that I had documents proving the house was mine, that they had entered illegally with a stolen key, and that I needed them removed immediately. Melissa started screaming that I was overreacting, that we were family, that I couldn't do this to them. Brandon started saying I was a crazy bitch, that they just wanted help, that it was the least I could do for my sister. The kids were all crying at this point. The police arrived in like 15 minutes, 2 officers, a man and a woman, and I explained the situation to them, showed them the deed to the house, explained that these people had entered without my permission using a key they had obtained fraudulently. Melissa tried to convince the police officers that it was all a misunderstanding, that our mom had told them they could stay, but the officers were super clear. The house was mine. I hadn't given them permission. They had to leave or they would be arrested for trespassing. Brandon started picking up the stuff, cursing under his breath. Melissa was crying dramatically while packing the kids' things, and I stood there with my arms crossed watching them take all their stuff out of my house. Before leaving, Melissa looked at me with so much hatred that it even surprised me, and told me, "This isn't over. Mom and Dad are going to know what you did. We'll never forgive you." And I told her, "Perfect. I don't want your forgiveness. I just want you to leave me alone." They left. The police left after making sure everything was okay, and I was left alone in my house looking at the mess they had left. It took me like 2 hours to clean everything, pick up the toys, clean the cereal off the floor, wash the dishes they had dirtied, make my bed where apparently they were planning to sleep. The next day, the first thing I did was call a locksmith and change all the locks in the house. Then I called a lawyer that a friend had recommended, told him everything that had happened, and he helped me draft cease and desist letters for my mom, Melissa, and Brandon. Basically, the letters said that any future unsolicited contact, any attempt to enter my property, any form of harassment, would result in legal action. I sent them by certified mail so they couldn't say they didn't receive them. My mom called me from my dad's phone, which I hadn't blocked yet, screaming about how dare I threaten them with lawyers, that I had called the police on my own sister, that I was a heartless monster. I told her very calmly that she had stolen a key to my house, that she had facilitated people entering my property illegally, and that if anything similar happened again, I would sue her. I hung up and blocked that number too. It's been like 6 months since all that, and I haven't heard anything from them. I blocked the entire extended family too because I'm sure they told them their version of the story where I'm the villain, and honestly, I don't care. Some cousins have tried to contact me through LinkedIn, which is super random, but I ignore them. An aunt sent me a physical letter. Yes, a paper letter, saying I should apologize to my family. That family is the most important thing, all that stuff. And I threw it in the trash without even finishing reading it. My life now is quiet, peaceful. Exactly how I wanted it to be. I work from my home office, the house I chose, that I paid for, that's completely mine. On weekends, I work in my garden. I've adopted a cat named Taco. I see my friends when I want without having to report to anyone. I don't have to deal with the constant drama, the unreasonable demands, the sick favoritism, none of that. Do I feel bad sometimes? I'm not going to lie. There are moments when I think about what it would be like to have a normal family, a family that really loves you for who you are and not for what you can do for them. But then I remember the 25 years I spent trying to earn the love and approval of people who were never going to give me either, and it passes. The guilt I felt at the beginning, that feeling that maybe I was being too harsh, completely disappeared when I remembered that they literally tried to take over my house, that my own mother stole a key from me to facilitate their entry, that they were planning to stay there who knows how long without even asking me. Some people at work have asked me why I never talk about my family, why I never mention them, and I just say, "We're not close," and change the subject. I don't need to explain the details to anyone. I don't need validation from strangers about my decisions. I know I did the right thing. I know that setting those boundaries, however extreme they may seem, was absolutely necessary for my mental health and my peace. Last week, I was in my garden, planting some new flowers I bought at Home Depot, and my neighbor, a super nice older lady named Beatrice, came over to ask how I was. We've talked a few times since I moved in. Nothing very deep. But she's kind. She asked if I had family in the area, and I told her no, that I lived alone. She said, well, if you ever need anything, anything at all, just knock on my door. We all need a little family, even if it's not blood. And that made me feel good. Like really good. Because she was right, the family you choose is often better than the family you got. So that's my story. A daughter who was never important enough for her parents, who decided to stop trying to be, who bought her own house with her own money, and who had to call the police to remove her own sister from that house when she tried to take it over. It sounds super dramatic when you say it like that, and I guess it is. But it's also liberating. Like I finally closed that chapter of my life where I let people treat me like garbage because we shared blood. My house is my space, my refuge, the first place that's truly mine, and nobody, absolutely nobody, has the right to take that away from me.